on the 25th of November 2019. The Numbers Man Show from WBRN and on the Bostonred Network. The title of this episode is This Week in Economics. It's normally the title of our shows. There are occasions that we rebrand, or retitle, we're not rebranding, the shows to highlight a specific occurrence, like a Fed meeting or something that has happened out there. And also from time to time on this particular network, the Numbers Man Network, we'll have an episode that focuses on, or a show that focuses on a particular area. We at one time focused on internet technology, IT, the economics of IT. We looked at it with more of a critical eye. We hope next year to bring back some of those special areas of research, hopefully there. Nonetheless, this particular show will revolve around various PMIs from the market people, and also we'll look at the consumer survey from the University of the University of Michigan. I'm on the wrong channel here. And see where it is and how it relates to consumers during this holiday buying season. And we'll also have some anecdotal information that we throw out, and some international news, as most people are familiar by now. In the UK, they have an election coming up in December that will at least put in motion the fate of Brexit. That is the decoupling of the UK, the United Kingdom, from the European Union. And it's a transitory process. It won't happen one day. I believe it's a year once they set it in motion. And what they will do with the so-called Irish backstop, we don't know. The latest scheme is to draw a line literally down the sea between the UK and the Republic of Ireland. You have what's called Northern Ireland, which is a province of the UK, something going back to colonial days, or at best the days that the colonies were there, neo-colonialism, that sort of thing. But here we are dealing with the modern industrial economy, and also where the market plays. It's interesting. We used to, when we talked about macroeconomics, what we talk about here, it was all about what central banks did in terms of their monetary and fiscal policy. And that was the end of that. But now there is attention given to where the various markets are, stock markets, and what is up, what is down. And these industrial economies are becoming more consumer-oriented. I can recall there was a big controversy at one time when the U.S. was moving towards a sales-type economy, broad-based economy, and not a in other words, they were moving away from a manufacturing economy. They were actually making the leap. And the leap at that to a service economy, let me get this straight here, to a service economy. So we had a PCI service economy. Service economy is still out there, the parts of the economy that serve things. It could be people, it could be corporations, etc. And then, of course, you had the long heralded manufacturing economy, a throwback to the industrial age and the emergence of places like Manchester, and the Germans and still today they're manufacturing centers. And then of course in the US you had steel and various other things. Detroit with the big three automobile companies and that whole ecosystem there, and also that was in not only in Michigan but in Ohio and in other points there. And later these companies migrated south to places like Alabama and North Carolina, etc. So you got manufacturing that moved into those areas. And at the same time, you had mining, you had petroleum product. That used to be relegated to primarily the Southwest, Texas, and of course places like around Bakersfield out in California, and you got into those states and on into Louisiana where you were drilling for oil and oil products. But later that also evolved into the steam pressure system called shale oil, and that is in the Dakotas. It's also in Texas. These are oil wells. They can force it out by using enormous amounts of water there, and what the environmental issues are of that, also frequent to hurricanes, etc. But we also see now a new branch of macroeconomics, climate economics, the economics of climate change. You can hear more and more about this, how climate change affects the overall economy of all of these industrialized nations, whether it be rising sea levels in Europe, in places like New Orleans, or it is fires out on the West Coast in California and those areas, droughts, these unusual Arctic blasts coming in across the Midwest and, of course, into the Northeast. All these things impact the workings of an industrial economy. Housing. You can't build houses if it's the climatic conditions are not favorable to it. And various other things that you cannot do there, even the movement of consumers. Longer winters means that people have bought their winter wear, and normally with the fashion scene that come into spring and summer, that can be late or it can be early. So in other words, the whole supply chain ecosystem itself, is turned literally upside down. And I was looking at a figure, and I hope I have this right. I don't have my cheat sheet here now, but there were, I believe, 3,700 somewhere in that vicinity of retail stores that were forced out of business in 2019. There was a study there, and I think we may be able to get it before we're finished up here. I just remembered where I think I actually stuck it. Anyway, that is just retail, brick and mortar. That was done by, who was it? One of the, had an index there. I'll have to get it to find out who they were. Anyway, nonetheless, one of the investment bank, forensic arms, we'll call it. Anyway, let me just move along here into some of the factors and look broadly over the economy itself, and we'll do this from CNBC. We'll do the international economy piece this time around. We'll look at it from some of the BBC, particularly in, I believe it's Zimbabwe, and how many dollars you need to carry down the street. Anyway, some of the things that happened here, we'll talk about consumer sentiment in a minute, but U.S. jobless claims unchanged at fifth-month high. This was from Reuters on the 21st of November. And U.S. housing starts rebound, building permits at highest level in over 12 years. That's kind of an interesting situation. There was a piece by Dr. Hume that he did, I believe, for either the BBC or National Public Radio. They were talking about the what would be the effects of forgiving college debt. And we don't usually hear about that, but what would effectively happen, and Elizabeth Warren, one of the candidates, has that, and also Bernie Sanders. If you forgave, depending on what percentage of it you forgave and how you did it, that would basically turn into a substitution situation where young people would have more money to spend on things like buying homes. And that could be done because these enormous payments would be forgiven, and at the same time, the federal government is the largest holder of these college loans. Therefore, they would have to be a taxation replacement. But this is where you get into the new order of things. They call it modern economics. We've looked at that before, where you look at the long term and you appropriate money that is borrowed. It's done now. Deficit spending is the same thing. But this type of situation, you're talking about things such as Medicare for All, where it'll cost several $1 trillion, but in the future, you actually save money because, first of all, you have a much more efficient healthcare system. Secondly, you are able to intervene in diseases that people have before they become very costly to deal with. And you also control the pricing of drugs, etc., because you have the Medicare program and everyone is in it. And there are various forms out there. There's Medicare for All, and then there's one called the public option, etc. But it eliminates copays, and that's basically the same principle. If you don't have the copays and these deductibles, that is more discretionary money that consumers have to buy things that businesses have to invest in R&D development. And that's the whole idea, is around development and the money for development and to upgrade education systems as the new demographics move. The baby boomers will be moving out, and as the baby boomers move out of the picture and more, and you have Gen X, etc., will be moving in. But you still have an enormous pool of young people, 18 to 30, that are out there, and that's what Dr. Hume was talking about. That would create more jobs, and of course, not only would more people be employed building homes, materials suppliers would supply more materials, etc., across the board, and retraining of people for skills. Just an idea there that I thought we would throw out while we are on that particular subject. Let me just we'll go over here. We'll stay with CNBC. I think we'll go to, actually, this is a consumer sentiment comes in higher than expected for November. I think we'll make a little bit of a commentary on this. This is economists polled by Dow Jones expected consumer sentiment to dip to 94.9 November. But in actuality, it rose. Now, last month it was at 95.5. Now, this is not very unusual. Particularly, you'd heard the recession moniker put out there, possible recession. Well, when you're in a holiday, and also it's how it's presentation, let me just break this up a little bit. What consumers look at, the sales started very early this cycle as we go into the Turkey Day holiday and, of course, what's called Black Friday. But these retailers, what is left of the retailing community and the online retailers, Amazon, etc., AliExpress, eBay, you name it, there have been bargain prices out there for a very long time. Now, there'll be a few specials for Black Friday. I was looking at one particular outfit in Kenya, of all places. They have some of their online operation have some of the same types of sales are coming on. Now, one of the interesting things here, back to optimism, we've talked about the psychology of the market or the economy, the level of optimism. This is one of their key points, hasn't been seen since the period between January of 1998. Now, this is during the dot-com boom and December of 2000, when the index was at 100. This was the University of Michigan above for 34 or 36 months. But now the economy was much smaller at that time, and less globalized, if I would throw that point out here, so people are not confused at what is going on. And if you average out the consumer sentiment, according to Professor Curtin, has been at 95 or higher in 30 of the past 35 months. But it is a totally different situation. There's no doubt about that. Let me just go look at the survey here, and we'll go to the PCIs, because there are many of those who will actually go to the University of Michigan. And we'll look at, this is the results for November 2019. Index of Consumer Sentiment was at 96.8. In October this year, it was at 95.5. And in November of last year, it was actually much higher. It was 97.5. The change was a plus 1.4%. And year to year, it was a negative not 0.7%. Current economic conditions at 111.6 in November. They were at 113.2 in October. And last year, they were at 112.3. The change there was a negative 1.4%, month-to-month change, that is, and year-to-year change was a negative 0.6%. The index of consumers was at, and this is in November, at 87.3, and in October was 87.4, and last year was at 88.1. The change, month-to-month change, was 3.7%. And year-to-year was negative 0.9%. Now, this is a full spill from Dr. The November 2019 consumer sentiment figures was nearly identical to the average level recorded since the start of 2017 at 97 there, and in the 30 of the past 35 months, the sentiment index was at 95, a higher level of optimism, second only to when the index was above 100. That was 34 out of 36. Again, that was from January of 1998 to December of 2000, when we went into a recession. Anyway, averaging 106 there, although impeachment proceedings occurred in both time periods. And remember, that was a Clinton impeachment, but it didn't affect the outcome of the economy at all. The current period is destructive from much sharper partisan division in the economy's expectations among consumers, as well as a wider gap in optimism between consumers and business firms. Now, business firms are pessimistic. One side anticipates a recession, while the other side expects uninterrupted expansion in the year ahead. To be sure, there is ample reason for both optimism as well as pessimism, but not the extreme differences voiced by these groups. Most consumers are not so naive as to anticipate continual decline in inflation, unemployment, and interest rates, but few consumers anticipate sizable increase in these key economic factors anytime soon. Personal spending will be energized by record favorable evaluations by consumers of their personal financial situations, with gains expected across the entire income distribution, net increases in household wealth, the renewal appeal of price discounting, the reduced mortgage rates, see the chart. Needlessly, there is little point in dismissing the significant risk for potential negative shocks associated with tariffs, the impeachment, the presidential election, global growth, geopolitical events. It has been differences in how these risks have been assessed that the underline the partisan differences amongst consumers and the gap in sentiment between business and consumer sector. It's kind of interesting here that they are actually highlighting the gap between business and consumers, because from a business standpoint, businesses see a very, very rocky situation. Their profit lines are not what it used to be, and that's basically why the consumers are still in the ball game. An example would be was given in the food outlets, the turkey of all things. The cost of turkeys, depending on where you buy your turkey, could be $3.50 a pound or more in New York. And if you go to some place like Houston, Texas, it could be 40 or 50 cents a pound. That was per pound, incidentally. And so it would depend. Now, this would be for a quote-unquote fresh turkey, not a frozen turkey. But the markets are using the turkeys as basically a loss leader and make it up with other foodstuffs. And the problem here is, obviously, during the Thanksgiving holidays, people stock up. And then these retail food outlets see less in terms of people buying things. And the same thing happens during the Santa time. People stock up for the holiday celebrations associated with it. But Thanksgiving being a special holiday, a family holiday, where there's a lot of food spending on food and other related stuffs. And then people are getting ready for the so-called Black Friday, and many people are having, many of the retailers, Amazon, etc., are having the Black Friday deals before Black Friday. So it's an elongated buying season. In fact, I was talking to this lady that had already finished her buying of annual presents. So, and all of that has changed. In the old days, we were much more subdued. We went to stores, brick and mortar stores. There was nothing online, and bought whatever was. And we looked to the after holiday sales. It didn't have a Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or whatever it is. I almost forgot about that one. But those are some of the things that have changed in this merchandising. But at the same time, too many buts here, you have modernized supply chain. So in other words, they don't have to buy 1,000 widgets. They can just buy 100, almost on demand. I don't want to run short. But now you will see these various marketers actually run out of, quote-unquote, the widgets, and the widgets arrive later. But if you need the widgets. Anyway, this is a University of Michigan's consumer take. But it is interesting when you pit business sentiment against the consumer sentiment. But well, a lot of it is also what consumers see. If they see bargains at Amazon or have Prime or whatever they have, and all of these things are leading there, and they hear that the market is up to, say, 2,800. Well, okay. And at the same time, Australia to Germany, etc. To this is the German one. And I did not put these PDFs up in advance. I'll call them up on the workstation here, and we'll see where we are. Eurozone. So with these PCIs, you can get a very good, I guess what you'd call a working idea of what is going on. We'll start here. This is the ISH Market Flash US Composite PMI. Anyway, the major findings here. The index was at 51.9, and it was 50.9 in October, a former high. The Flash US Service Business Activity Index at 51.6. It was 50.6 in October, former high. The manufacturing PMI at 52.2. It was 51.3 in October. It's a 7-month high. The Flash U.S. Manufacturing Output Index at 53.1. It was 52.4 in October, a 10-month high. The U.S. Private sector output increased at a faster pace in November, with rare expansion quickening to a 4-month high. Growth was sponsored by stronger increases in activity across both manufacturing and service. Adjusted for seasonal factors, the ISH market flash U.S. composite PMI output index 51.9. We already talked about that, so we won't linger on that matter. Service providers noticed a pickup in client demand. The upturn in new business was historically weak and well below rates of growth seen at the start of the year. Now, this goes back to what the University of Michigan was talking about. Needlessly, firms responded by increasing their workforce numbers for the first time since August. The pace of job creation was only fractional. However, as many firms kept their employment numbers unchanged, optimism amongst service providers dipped from what is seen in October and remains historically subdued. Reports of less favorable demand conditions. Meanwhile, service sector firms increased their selling price at a faster rate due to a slightly quicker rise in input costs. Goods producers signaled a strong improvement in operating conditions in November, as signaled by a rise in the Flash Manufacturing Purchase Manager Index to 52.2. The rate of overall growth was the fastest since April, albeit modest overall. And that's the key here. The improvement in health of manufacturing sector was supported by a sharper and solid expansion in production new orders. The rate of increase in former reached a 10-month high and reported strong client demand. Manufacturing registered the first increase in backlog since June, with firms responding to greater pressure on capacity by increasing staffing levels at the steepest pace since March. At the same time, a faster rise in input costs led to steep increase in factory gate charges in November. Greater customer demand allows firms to partially pass through the higher cost to clients. Needlessly, goods producers were less confident towards the outlook for output over the coming 12 months. Firms commonly stated that reduced optimism was linked to ongoing economic uncertainty. There's a lot of that out there. And from Dr. Williamson here, a welcome upturn in the helpline index for flash PMIs added to evidence that the worst of the economy's recent salt patch may be behind us. Output of the combined manufacturing and service sector rose in November at the fastest pace since July, spurred by improvements in inflow of new business. Encouragingly, firms took on staffing again 2 months of headwinds reductions, primarily to help deal with rising backlog of work. A recovery of manufacturing production growth to a 10-month high is especially welcome news, helping to lift the sector's activities growth from recent lows. However, although improving, the picture of current economic business conditions remains subdued by standards seen over the past decade, past 10 years, and the business mood. Back to the University of Michigan here. So we're in relation to prospects for the year ahead. The latest survey results are indicative of GDP rising modestly amortized rate of 1.5, with payrolls rising at a monthly clip of about 100,000. Although up on the lows seen in the summer, business expectations for the future are still well below levels seen early in the year, reflecting higher anxiety regarding trade wars, geopolitical uncertainty, as well as recent low consumer inquiry numbers and the weakness of new sales volume. So that is basically the U.S. economy. The index is the same. So let me start backing up a little bit here. We're now to the EU. The EU near stall for third month running in November. This is their flash PMI at 50.3. It was 50.6 in October, 2-month low. The flash Eurozone services PMI index at 51.5. It was 52.2 in October, a 10-month low. The flash manufacturing PMI output index below 50 at 47.1. It was 46. Some improvement, 46.6. October, 3-month high there. The flash Eurozone manufacturing PMI 46.6. It was 45.9 in October, again a 3-month high. Euro economy remains close to stagnant for a third consecutive month, basically towards a recessionary situation setting up there. Losing growth momentum slightly, again, as new orders fell for a third straight month. The survey shows signs of steep ongoing manufacturing decline spreading further to services. Employment growth, meanwhile, slipped to its lowest for almost 5 years as firms took an increasingly cautious approach to hiring. Price pressures also cooled further and running at the lowest for 3 years. At 50.3 in November, the Eurozone composite PMI fell from 50.6 in October to signal the second smallest expansion of output across manufacturing and services since the current upturn began in July of 2013. The past 3 months have been consequently seen as a continual near stagnation of output, contrasting markedly with the robust growth seen over the same period 1 year ago. And this does happen sometimes in economies. Weak output growth reflects a third consecutive month decline in new orders for goods and services, abide with a rate of decline easing slightly for the second month running to register only a marginal drop in demand. The ongoing decline needlessly represents the worst spell of demand since mid-2013. Conditions with the rate of decline of output eased modestly for the second month running, but remains one of the sleepiest since early 2013. Encouragingly, new order inflows fell at a slower pace, and this basically coincides with the Fed's beige book from various federal districts. Optimism about future factory output needlessly also improved, reaching a 5-month high, helping ease the rate of job losses. Factory employment has now fell for the 7th consecutive month, representing the worst period for manufacturing since, again, the magic of 2013. Service sector growth, meanwhile, weighed to the lowest point since January, as new business inflows showed the second smallest increase in almost 5 years. Backlog of work fell at an increased rate, and expectation of future service growth hit the lowest since June of 2013, leading to the smallest rise in service sector employment since January. Price pressures were again against the weakest in manufacturing, which both include input costs and selling price fell further during the month, the latter declining at the sharpest rate since April 2016. While both costs and selling prices continue to rise in the service sector, average changes level growth at joint slowest rate since 2017. The further fall in new business meant backlogs of work decreased for the 11th time in the past year, deteriorating at one of the steepest rates seen in the past 5 years. Expectations about the future output remain well below levels seen early in the year, reflecting heightened geopolitical uncertainty, including Brexit, trade wars, auto tariffs, plus general concerns about slowing demand. The worsening order book picture, meanwhile, contributed to further pullbacks in hiring, with firms increasingly cautious about extending their headcount. Employment growth slowed to the fifth consecutive month in November, down to its lowest level since 2015. Weak demand environment also fueled more price discounting as firms sought to boost sales price. Average prices charged for goods and services rose at the joint weakest rate for 3 years. A comment here from Dr. Williamson: the Eurozone economy remains beclaimed for a third consecutive month in November, with lackluster PMI indicative of GDP growth at a quarter rate of just 0.1%, down from 0.2% in the third quarter. Manufacturing remains in its deepest downturn for 6 years. Ongoing trade woes, and November saw further signs of weakness spilling over to the service sector via slower employment growth. Resilient job growth has proven a key support to more domestically focused service sector early in the year, but with employment now rising at a slowest pace since early 2015. Tentative signs of life in core Eurozone countries, France and Germany, are welcome news, as is an easing in manufacturing downturn. Business remain concerned by trade wars, Brexit, and a general slowdown in demand, with heightened uncertainty about the economy and political outlook driving further risk aversion. Spend a little time on the Eurozone because it's very important in terms of Europe and all these nations thrown in there. The UK private sector output dropped, the steepest drop since 2016. Their composite output index is at 48.5. That is a 40-month low. In October, they were at 50. Flash service activity index at 48.6. Another 40-month low. They were at 50. 50 is the breaking point. And UK manufacturing index at 48.3. Excuse me. At 2-month low, it was at 49.7 in October. The flash manufacturing PMI was at 48.3. It was 49.6. Today sees the public release of a new index published on a monthly basis anyway. The comment here from Dr. Williamson: with an upcoming election adding to Brexit-related uncertainty about the outlook, it's no surprise to see UK business reporting a falling output and orders in November. The decline signaled by flash PMI follows stagnation in October, adding to what has been the survey's worst spell since the Depression of 2008-2009. The weak survey data puts the economy on course for a 0.2% drop in the GDP in Q4, and also pushes the PMI further into territory that would normally be associated with the Bank of England adding more stimulus to the economy. While Brexit issues such as stock building and car factory closures have led to volatile GDP data so far this year, making monetary policy especially difficult and encouraging the Bank of England to set it on its hands until the fog clears. The PMI surveys are not only warnings that the underlying trends in the economy is deteriorating markedly, but also that the labor market is cooling. A worsening job market has the potential to feed through to a weaker consumer spending and a slower wage growth, therefore undermining reports to the economy in recent months. The big question that will be how long can the Bank of England hold its nerve in keeping policy unchanged. Well, I think they're in more of a wait and see attitude here, and this is basically where they are in the Germany. Their PMI there, that index is at 49.2 this month. October was 48.9, a 3-month high. The service PMI, this is for Germany, at 51.3. It was 51.6. And it's a 38-month low for Germany. Manufacturing PMI at 43.8. It was 42.1, 5-month high. Manufacturing input index at 45.2. It was 43. And we won't repeat things here. Manufacturing remains a main area of weakness in November. That said, the sector drag on the overall output continues to ease as the rate of decline in factory production slowed for the second month, running to the weakest since August. Growth of service business activity, meanwhile, remains subdued. The increase in service output in November was, in fact, the weakest since September 2016. Weighing on business activity in November was a fifth straight month of decline in total new orders. Service providers and manufacturers reported lower demand alike, though rates declined in order book slowed to the weakest for 3 and 10 months. The downturn in total new orders also eased as manufacturers recorded the slowest decrease in demand from abroad since January. Firms reported lower backlog of work for the 13 months in a row in November, easing only slightly in October. After falling in October by only slightly for the first time, private sector employment showed virtually no change during November. Job creation in the service sector moderated to a 43-month low, but was needlessly solid enough to compensate for further by slow step cuts at manufacturing. Paul Smith, economist. Beneath the subdued headline numbers, the data shows another slightly convergence between the more domestically focused service sector and export-led manufacturing, while still showing a degree of resilience. The service sector is growing more modestly, and it is at a slower rate for 3 years. By contrast, manufacturing remains firmly in contraction, but many of the indicators here are at least moving in the right direction. It would seem the worst of the downturn is over, barring any shocks. Lack of employment growth remains a worry, but the survey data do at least point to support to consumer spending from low inflation and rising wage growth there. Let me just... Bank of Japan. This is their flash. Bank of Japan flash. They were at 49.9, much better. In October's final was 49.1. The flash service business was at 50.4. It was at 49.7 in October. Manufacturing was at 48.6, and it was 48.4 in October. Some improvement there in Japan. The commentary here from Joe Hayes. October's PMI data was difficult to interpret as a result of temporary negative stock caused by sales tax and typhoons. However, we have now deducted from the November PCI data that there's a strong possibility of the Japanese economy contracting in Q4. We've seen a little rebound following of these temporary factors, especially in the service sector, where the impact of the tax raise and poor weather was the most prominent. The service sector, which was boarding reasonable rates of growth up until September, has recorded a market easing in growth momentum, with manufacturing malaise still stalkily apparent. PMI implied growth rates in the service sector are insufficient to offset Japan's industrial woes. Stock in export demand, the protracted U.S.-China trade war, and limited policy level stack up against the chances of improvement in the Japanese economy without any drive from the service sector. According to contraction in Q4 is highly likely. That is Japan. So we really have output decline for the first time in 3 months. This is Commonwealth Bank of Australia here. The latest Commonwealth Bank of Australia flash composite signals a renewed fall in private sector output in Australia during November, following no change in October. Declines were seen across both manufacturing and the service sector. Excuse me about that. The rate of input costs, inflation accelerated, but companies let their selling prices broadly unchanged, and relatively weak demand environment. The headline figure derived from the survey is the Commonwealth Bank of Australia's Flash Composite Output Index, which is designed to provide a timely indication there. Anyway, we won't get into where the readings are. Nonetheless, that activity index was at 49.5, declined from expansion. This is interpretation. And in October, it was at 51.1. Expansion, slow rate of growth. Output decreased for the third month running, with marginal contraction the same as that seen in October. Meanwhile, the rate of decline in new orders quickened to the fastest in a 43-month survey history. Falling workload led manufacturers to lower their staffing levels slightly. Meanwhile, business sentiment dropped to a 41-month low. Let's sum this up here. Commentary here by Michael Beff. He's a chief economist there. Activity in key manufacturing service sectors continued to bounce around in the 50 line that separates expansion from contraction. This is particularly disappointing result when the benchmark against interest rate cuts, tax cuts, rising house prices, and a still solid labor market. He also noted readings of new orders and employment often offer a glimmer of positive news, but the challenges faced by Australian business are evident in the accelerated growth in input price and slowing trend in output price. Competitive price and weak demand are taking a toll. No doubt about that. That will take a toll each and every time here. Business activity decreased in November, the first reduction in 3 months. Modest fall in activities were recorded across both manufacturing and service sectors, the first time that both have seen contraction since May of 2016. Companies continue to register increase in new business, but the rate of expansion was only slight. Backlog of work were up marginally during November, with volumes of new and outstanding work ticking higher. Companies expanded their staffing levels for the fourth consecutive month. Input costs increased at a sharp pace, with the rate of inflation quickening to a 13-month high. Higher fuel costs were widely mentioned by panelists, with increase in raw materials and staffing costs also reported. Despite the sharp rise in input costs, companies in Australia left their input pricings broadly unchanged. In fact, service providers lowered the charges for the first time since June of 2016. Respondents indicated that pricing power had been restrained by competitive pressures amongst a challenging demand environment. Business conditions dipped in November, with sentiment lowered across both monitored sectors. Optimism regarding a 12-month outlook for business activity was lowest in 41 months. So that is not, as they say, the rosiest picture in the world here. We'll turn back to CNBC here, and we'll start to wind down. We do have some things here. Now, again, this is information that in Shanghai they were at 20.88. The HSI was at 397.96. The SK was at 21.60. PUPSI was at 21.54. Now these do change. Now this was on the morning here, so we'll look and see how all of this turns out. Just looking at some of these top movers in the U.S. market there. Nordstrom was up 10.557%. Macy's up 5.81%. L Brands up 4.92%. The Gap was up 4.439, and Smuckers, it was up 4.081. And some of the companies are taking the beating, and I suppose they're keeping on ticking into it. A negative 4.182, Hess up 6. And in CNBC, a big flash here. Stock market forecasters see 5% gain in 2020. Market may get a boost from Black Friday consumer sentiment strength. Well, maybe so, but these are usually only temporary situations here. Difficult to amass them. Let's look at this again on the 25th. FTSE was at 0.91% there. It's FTSE 100. In the percentage change, it was at 66.34. In Amsterdam, they were at 3.52. We won't give the percentages here, too confusing. In France, they were at 20.82. The DAC at 55.96, 14.01. And in Madrid, they were at 58.20. Not bad at all. In Bombay, 529.82. The Hang Seng was at 397.96. And the Nikkei at 179.93. And let's get the U.S. market. The Dow was at 109.33. The Nasdaq at 13.67. And the S&P 500 at Brent crude was at $63.36. Brent crude futures. And West Texas Intermediate was at 57.69. T. Boone Pickens' ancestors are happy. It was down 8 cents and 3 cents, respectively. The Forex gold was at $1,471.30. And I think this is all we have. This was from the BBC, incidentally. And what else do we have here? Incidentally, Uber has been banned or will be banned from London. They lose their license to operate in London. They are appealing, so they are still in the business, so to speak. A lot of problems there with Uber drivers jumping all around. Period. Tiffany's and Company has been sold. Louis Vuitton, I think is how I pronounce his name. That was at, $16 billion. Spanish bank, Spanish-owned bank will close 15% of its branches with an aim to make 100 million pounds of cost cutting. So more people are cutting costs. No, this is not it. I thought we had a story out of, we'll wait a second here on it, a featured thing here. Zimbabwe, letter from Zimbabwe, the land where the cash barons thrive. A nice picture there. I think we'll use it for our picture too. In a series of letters from various writers, etc. Cash is king. You'll note that in your hand, to avoid paying premiums for goods. For example, if you're in a supermarket to buy a $15 Zimbabwe dollar loaf of bread, you pay 15 in cash, 18 in mobile money, and 20 Zimbabwe dollars on the debit card. You'll also need cash for bus fares, electronic transfers. Oh, some nice vegetables there. A family of 5, school age, will need 250 Zimbabwe dollars for a week of transportation. Extra costs for bread, tomatoes, and sugar could another $150 Zimbabwe dollars. Yet banks have been rationing cash withdrawals to 300 Zimbabwe dollars a week at ATMs. and ATMs have been emptied out. The cash crunch has led to a spike in inflation. It's running at 100% in June when local currency was officially reintroduced. It is now between 300% and 400%. They were tagged under President Mugabe to the U.S. dollar. Oh boy. Long lines queuing here at banks for people willing to get their monthly rations of cash. So you get a monthly rations of cash. I suppose if you carry some cash around, you'll be in good shape here. Last week, bank queues began moving toward, thanks to a new supply of $2 and $5 notes worth about 300 Zimbabwe dollars. They were released by the central bank, although some banks are rationing daily withdrawals, not allowing people to take more than their $300 Zimbabwe weekly allowance. The influx of cash doesn't seem to affect the cash barons. So I suppose these cash barons, I'm not sure what they're carrying around, have little faith in how to go. I imagine so. Anyway, suppose you just carry around here. Annual inflation reached the Zimbabwe dollar was abandoned because of hyperinflation. That was in 2009 when the country mainly adopted the dollar in South Africa and rand. Annual inflation reached 231 million percent. Officials gave up reporting monthly statistics. It peaked at. Anyway, the Zimbabwe dollar was reintroduced and foreign currencies were banned because the country has effectively run out of forex. Well, prices are now increasing on the average about twice a month, while salaries have remained stagnant. I suppose if you're lucky enough to be employed at all. The central bank said over the next 5 months there would be a gradual injection of $1 billion Zimbabwe in cash, Zimbabwe dollars. The momentum, the high domination of $5, which is worth about 30 cents U.S., cannot buy a soft drink or ice cream. Oh boy. Anyway, I thought we would introduce that as what can sometimes happen. I mean, it can really get to be a very bad news for everyone out there. Let me just check on one thing. This WBRN radio. Take a break, and that figure I was getting here was from Credit Suisse. They have what is called their tracker here. Decline in foot traffic at malls, fewer shopping days between Black Friday and Christmas this year. We attribute to a rough road ahead in 2019. Is on track to be the worst year for closures in the 24 years of the Credit Suisse index that tracks them. Let me get to the right one here. So it's brutal murder here, I suppose you'd say that. Anyway, Credit Suisse also lowered estimates for Nordstrom, Kohl's, JCPenney shares in Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, etc. If better holiday trend do not materialize, we think we're going to be, increase toughly for softline retailers to avoid closures in 2020. In fact, our real estate contacts are bracing for another round of large-scale store closures. More of those will be going than coming. Here, this is Credit Suisse Index. I saw a figure here, and I was published in the Financial Times, and I looked at this article in a number of different places to find out. It may not be jolly. That's what they were saying here because of the tough road. This is by Matthew Rocco. He's in New York, writing about the debacle that was coming, and holiday season sales are seen rising between 3.8 and 4.2 this year versus 2018, despite uncertainty around trade, etc., etc. That is Klingheisen, NRF. I think that's the National Retail Federation. The pullback in September compared with August is a possible reaction to increased fear over trade relations. A series of factors such as early into back to school shopping periods made September a tough month to measure. Some of the stores, Burlington and Nike, nice list with analysts there, period. So that's how they look at this. I thought I got more than one. I didn't get to find a number, but anyway, it was over 7,000 stores closing there, and the Credit Suisse, unfortunately I couldn't get the whole thing. That is part of their paid wall that you get their index, but no doubt it will be out. Credit Suisse index that tracks them, so it could be a worse year for store closures in 24 years. So that is the little note we have there. This will do it for us on the 25th of November 2019's Numbers Man here in Jerry Pippin Memorial Broadcast Booth for the consumers. Keep your eye obviously on the prize. Those in business, well, make next week a productive one. You have a lot of things going on. Thanksgiving holiday and the after day out there on Black Friday. Cyber Monday, you name it, you will have it out there. What consumers will spend is very interesting, and we'll look and see how they use credit cards and that sort of thing.